gonna scoot your bag a second, Jeff. Greg. Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the St. Louis Zoo. I'm Steve Bircher. I'm curator of mammals here at the zoo, and I'm manager of the Carnivore collection at the St. Louis Zoo. I also am the director of our Wild Care Institute Center for Conservation of Carnivores in Africa. And that's how I actually came in contact with tonight's speaker, Dr. Greg Rasmussen. As you may know, that when we build new exhibits here at the zoo, as we have for the last 10, 15 years, we try to identify a conservation effort that's related to the species or an area of habitat, and we've been recently building the new exhibits, the two bear exhibits up at the river's edge. We also have the African painted dog exhibit. And we were looking for somebody who has expertise working with African painted dogs in the wild, and I think we found the right guy. We have Dr. Greg Rasmussen here this evening, and if you were lucky enough to hear Greg, he's given 2 other lectures here at the zoo last fall, in October I believe it was, and then he was here for another fundraising event in spring. He's obviously very passionate about what he does. He is the founder and research director of the Painted Dog Conservation. He actually received his Ph.D. from Oxford and has been exclusively working with the painted dog for 24 years. He's considered one of the world's foremost authorities on the African painted dog. And it was fun today because Greg and I had a chance to tour the zoo, and we went up to see the new exhibit for the first time. And I think he liked what he saw. He had a couple of ideas for enrichment, and we plan to incorporate those into the new exhibit. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Greg Rasmussen.
Hi, thank you, Steve. Let's see if this is going to do something. It seems decided to. Oops! There's always something. Power. Right. Well, just got to put some power into the. Well, it's a great. While I do this, it's a great pleasure to. Wait a minute. Where's the? Don't tell me I've got the wrong. What's this in here? That's nothing to do with me. Hold on a minute. We've got a. Huh?
Did I do something?
Oh no, there's here we are. Power supply. There you go. I'm all packed and ready to head off tomorrow, so I'm kind of right. Sorry for this little delay. Give someone else to sneak into the door. All right. That's why it went into. Okay. Right, we're away. Okay, good evening, everybody. And it's a great pleasure to be here at the St. Louis Zoo once again. Why is this not playing? Come on, Mr. Techie. Hey, now we're in business. And yes, as Steve said, I've been working with the painted dog for 25 years. It's a very unique carnivore, and it's often a good thing to start off a presentation, wake everyone up, and share with you what is one of the most famous calls of the painted dog. It's a who call, and they use it when they're in distress, and I often think that's quite symbolic. It travels for many, many miles, and that's something that we obviously want to get the message of the painted dog, and it's very unique. They're not a true dog. It's a who call, and it sounds something like this. And they use that, and they'll burst that sound, they blow it on the ground, and they'll send a message wide and loud and clear to say that there's a problem. So what I'm going to share with you tonight is a little bit about the dogs themselves, some of the stories from the field over the last 25 years. Believe me, there's many, too many sometimes, and share with you what a conservation project, what data from the field helps us to conserve them in the wild, and what's been going on. Well, yeah, the painted dog. This is, as I say, this is the new child of the St. Louis Zoo that's going to come sometime next year. There's nothing else like it in the world. They're a very unique canid. Those big ears are use them for cooling. They're not like a domestic dog. They don't pant. They're about as closely related to a domestic dog or a wolf as we are to a baboon. Okay, girls, don't say anything about us guys, you know. They've only got 4 toes. They haven't got the dew claw. And there is actually nothing in the world like them alive today. They are endangered, as Steve said. The St. Louis Zoo tries to keep the species that are endangered and then identify with species that they can maybe help by having them in the collection, facilitate help conservation and in situ efforts. As I say, the Mickey Mouse has got something to look out for. But apart from those amazing ears, the most amazing thing about the painted dog is their social system. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how it's one of the only species in the world that doesn't fight in the wild. In captivity, there's a few things. They get a bit antsy with each other sometimes. But you can hardly believe that there's a species that doesn't fight. They don't fight over territory. They share everything equitably. There's no one gets more than the others, except for the alpha female, and she doesn't fight for it. The others just give it to her, and they say, oh, you're having all the babies, so therefore, you know, like the queen bee, it gets all the nectar and all the best honey, so the alpha female gets looked after by all the others. They live in packs. A pack of painted dogs can be anything from 6 to about 30 or 40 dogs, and they work in the most seamless and most perfect team. Every single day when they wake up in the morning, every dog greets every other dog. It's chaos to watch, because you can imagine it. You know, if there's 20 dogs, there's 19 plus 18 plus 17 plus 16 greetings. So they don't go, oh, hello, everybody. They go, hello, 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 hello. And I'm going to share with you a little clip from a greeting of one dog that was missing for half an hour. I mean, can you imagine how terrible is that? Been missing for half an hour, and the pack wants to greet him. This is also a shortcut to doing some of the greetings. So rather than go 20, 19, 18, 17, they all kind of put their heads together and do an amazing talk. And talking of vocalizations, in this next clip, you'll get the chance to hear some of the other calls that the painted dogs make. They've got this very high-pitched chitters and twitters. They've got a whole language in there. And if you, I don't know if the sound's good enough, or the recording good enough, you'll be able to hear all sorts of different sounds coming in from different dogs, from high-pitched noises. And interestingly, only last year, after working with them for 24 years, I find out I'm using a bat detector, and I'm managing to find that painted dogs are capable of emitting ultrasound. So, you know, you think, oh, after 25 years, we know it all. We don't even, it's amazing. There's something special about nature. And certainly, you know, for everyone young in this audience thinking about moving forward into the world of, you know, the natural history world, it's fascinating. You know, it's a book that will never end, and you'll never get bored with it. You'll never get to the top of your career saying, oh, I know everything now, because you never, ever will. So here's this... So he's just woken up. And there's more. And that really sums up painted dogs. Each one of those dogs, incidentally, it was quite fun, that who call I played you. In the early days, I thought, oh, we can use those calls to bring the dogs closer, pretend we've got a dog in distress, so I can put a radio collar on easily. And then I found out it was having absolutely no effect on the dogs whatsoever, and they were ignoring all these distress calls from our microphones and megaphones. And what it actually was then I had a Ph.D. student on the case, and they found out that every single dog has got its name at the end of its call. So it's like, ooh, 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 and then there's a little ooh, and that little ooh says Greg, Fred, Martha. So there was me as a young, naive biologist playing these calls and wondering why, particularly if, say, I'm playing for a dog called Greg who sat in the pack and they're looking down, well, Greg's fine. What's their problem? And they're really very unique species, and they share, everything is, every single day they have these amazing bonds, and then they put a lot of effort into, when they've got good full stomachs and they've done the job of hunting, because they are obviously a hunter, they don't scavenge their food, they only take, antelope species, anything from, 20 pounds upwards to 500-pound animal they can take. But they spend a lot of time playing, and they love water. So part of you'll notice when the dogs finally appear at the St. Louis Zoo exhibit, you'll see there's a water exhibit all set up for them. Because they love water. And they'll spend hours and hours playing in water, sharing, but reinforcing the bonds with each other. They've got very long legs. They can run incredible distances, but for very long periods. So whilst the cheetah can maybe, go 100 yards, 150 yards, these guys can keep running for over a kilometer at very high speed, so like half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, and they'll still keep running for 4 miles if necessary, if a prey animal so makes them do so. One of my early experiences with a painted dog really shaped a lot of what I felt about them, and it was. I was following my first study pack, and I came across heard an interaction in the bush, and there was lions were there, clearly, dogs were defending a litter of puppies that they'd got, and this young yearling male got mauled by a lion. And I called in a vet, and I got this dog lying on the ground. Now, in Africa, of course, calling a vet isn't exactly saying, oh, will you come, will you be here in 5 minutes? It took me, 9 hours to get a vet from like 5 or 6 hours away to get all his kit together. And he came out, and he looked at this dog lying on the ground, and he looked at me as if to say, well, why did you bother calling me? This animal's as good as dead. And he said it's nature. It does actually, make a lot of thought process goes on in the background when someone says nature today, because we've fragmented habitat, we've taken populations down to next to nothing. We've done so many things that it is our duty to try and help every wildlife species out there. So anyway, so I left as a young biologist. I'd called the guy out. This is 25 years ago. I kind of walked away with a sort of heavy heart. And I came back the next day, and there were 10 dogs. And, okay, he's dead. And then I found that the pack, funny movements, the pack had dragged him away. And they licked his wounds, and they fed him for 3 months. And that wound you see on his neck there in that slide is 3 months old. Gives you some idea of how bad it was 3 months before that. And it wasn't an isolated incident. I thought, oh, maybe that's just the first pack I studied. And then I had other packs doing it. And I had a pack of dogs where 5 of them had been mauled by lions. And they were all this, like they'd come back from a war zone. Well, they had. They'd been in a serious fight with the pride of lions over, because when they were protecting their pups. And when they're protecting their kids, there's absolutely, these guys are masters. And I had 5 of them, and I had to keep giving them antibiotics by a dart. And there was one dog was just going around religiously licking the wounds of every other dog. And that was his job. And he did that job. And that's what the dogs are so great at. Every dog has a job. It's so perfect. It's a great state. It doesn't matter who the dog is in the pack. And even I was surprised sometimes. I've got a lot of characters in the dog world, and I've got a number of dogs that some are kind of the heroes of the dog world. They've done amazing things, and others are just great dogs. And one particular dog that came to mind in the early days of the study was a dog, I called him Magellan, after the GPS and the Explorer. Not because he was actually good at anything, he was always lost. And the Magellan Corporation had given me GPSs that didn't work. So I figured the dog and the GPS were about as good as each other. And I used to watch with regular monotony. Magellan, they'd hunt, they'd catch some food, and Magellan would come running along, he'd come running up, and he'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late again." They'd already eaten everything. And they'd all go, "Okay, here we go," and they'd all regurgitate a parcel of food for him. And I used to think, what can they do with a dog like that? You know, there's no place for Magellan in this world. Oh no, the pack had a role for him, and as soon as the pups were born, as long as it wasn't a dangerous babysitting duty, Magellan was sat on top of that den like the king. You know, he'd got a job, and they told him, "You babysit, you don't have to go hunting, you don't have to get lost." You know, and that's what dogs are good at. You know, the painted dog is so good at that, dividing labor, someone's doctor, and the ones that are good at hunting obviously take the lead in the hunting, and all the others have these supportive roles. This is just the next slide. So that's the same dog, by the way, after 6 months. So it was this that started to change a lot of my opinion about painted dogs. And one of the other things was that when I started, before I did painted dogs, as a young biologist, I actually worked with snakes a lot. Yeah, actually a lot of us boys, we all start off with snakes, and that's a great entry point into the world of nature. And so I used to work with the Naturalist Museum with snakes, and I used to work with poisonous snakes as well. So when I told my mother that I was leaving working with snakes and I was going to work with painted dogs that also were called in those days wild dogs, she like immediately rushes to the library and thinks, "Oh my God, this sounds even more dangerous than poisonous snake." Well, and she got this book, and you know, this is something I really hate, because one of the things that's really important is that there's so much rubbish written in this world about wildlife and everything else, and I think this is a fantastic role for, you know, organizations, you know, such as this institution to be able to let people know the truth about species. So anyway, she thought that she read this book that talked about painted dogs, you know, taking a horse down and eating the horse and killing the rider, and she's immediately thinking that she's saying to me, "Why don't you go back to working with poisonous snakes? We're safer." And I had this when I work with packs, when I wanted to really understand them, I used to follow them wherever they went. They had a radio collar, and if they slept here, I would sleep, you know, maybe 100 yards away, 200 yards away, if I could get that close, and then wait. When they hunted in the morning, I'd go with them. And the painted dogs' daily activity is they get up really early in the morning. At about 4:30, 5 o'clock, they hunt until about 9, then they hunt in the evening, and they hunt moonlight. And so one morning, early in the morning, I hear the radio tracking signal change, and I'm like, "Oh, they're up." So immediately I rush out of my bedroll on the ground. I used to have a bedroll, throw it on the ground, and I go to the toilet. And suddenly, as I get there, it turned out that the pack wasn't 200 meters away. They weren't 100 meters away. We'd actually slept about 20 or 30 yards away. But I hadn't detected it because the dog with the radio collar was buried up against this huge tree. And so they came towards me. Now, I was in that position where you've got your trousers down by your ankles. And there's not a lot you can do about it in that position. You can't bunny hop away. And they came closer and they came closer. They came to probably within 2 yards of me. The whole lot, 11 of them, all adults. And they surrounded me, and I'm thinking, "Well, Mum, you're going to find out now because I'm well exposed here." And I think the smell drove them away, and they all walked away. And in the wild, we actually have had no record of them, attacking people in the wild. It's been a very, and they're great animals to work with. But again, talk about myths. So what do they eat? Well, a little clip here. They're not open plains hunters. They like woodland, so that means habitat's important. So I'll share with you a little bit later about how we try to understand habitat and how important it is for the painted dogs. But I'm just sharing with you a little bit about the dogs. This is one of their major prey items, which is impala. They weigh up to about 140 pounds. Here's the dogs coming to try and catch something. They try and stay hidden till the last minute. No surprises there. And off they go. Not National Geographic style footage, but and you'll see this is quite fun. Everything scatters. The giraffe, off they go. Not that they're going to eat giraffe. That impala coming bounding back the other way was giving that I'm fit signal. And the kill is normally over in about 10 seconds. It's all done. And we never ever, very rarely do we ever get to see kills. In 25 years, we rarely get to see the pull down. We just see them eating something. It's that fast. But talking about predators, I've got a great slide that it took me, I don't take many pictures because I keep, if I'm using video, I have it switched on standby when all the action's happening, and I think I've turned it on, and I'm taking pictures of my feet and all those kind of things. So I actually normally just write notes. But, people often say, oh, predators, they take out too much prey animals. And, of course, that's nonsense. Predators take the sick, they take the weak. And actually, the prey animals, it's always quite fun to watch and see this, that when predators are fed, the prey are quite relaxed because they know that they're not going hunting. And so there we are. We've got a scene there. The dogs are there. We've got the prey and the impala up there. And on the right, on the far left, you've got some kudu, which is actually forms 60% of the diet. So 2 of those dogs there can easily take down a 500-pound animal, which is pretty impressive. And they do it using the same technique that humans use with horses and bulls. They bite the nose, take the nose and the lip, but mainly the nose. And by doing that, in the same way a horse or a bull stands, the body releases huge amounts of endorphins, which are like a morphine-based, and the animal just stands there. It's incredible the way it works. It's the same way that we often hear, and I unfortunately got personal experience of when you have a severe accident, for the first few minutes people feel nothing because the body's released all these endorphins and you don't feel pain. And I had a plane crash and I can testify. So, but by doing that, 2 of them will take down, say, a 500-pound animal in 60 seconds, and kind of generally after a few minutes, that's all that's left, even in a small pack. And after, say, 5 minutes, there's literally nothing but a few bones. Yep. The pack life. This is the focus of painted dog lives. Once a year, so a pack structure is starts off something like this. A bunch of brothers, females when they're about 2, will leave a pack, all as sisters, and they've got their own chosen alpha female. Now, it's not a female. She doesn't get her position because she's bossy. She doesn't get her position because she's, related to a high-ranking female. She gets her position because from a puppy to 1 year old, they all decide who's the one they're going to follow for the rest of their life. All the sisters will do that. The brothers are doing the same number. So the brothers are doing exactly the same, and they've got the alpha male that when he finally says, let's go and form a new pack, come on, brothers, they'll say, off we go. Now the females leave a pack and they stay quite close to their natal territory, stay close to home. And the guys, yeah, we do, it's a typical guy. They go hundreds of miles. They go all over the place. They're not content just, and get into all sorts of trouble. Most of them never come back. And they go looking for new territory. Because new territory isn't likely to be close to home. So they go and find new territories and they form a pack. And if, when they meet, the males meet the females, the alpha female from the female group, she chooses and decides whether she likes the males and likes their leader or not. And if she doesn't, it's like, sorry, you're on your own. And she'll go through a number of, often initially 1 or 2 or 3 groups of males until she finally settles, which will only take her about 6 weeks. It's amazing. She doesn't dilly-dally. And once she's done that, then they pair bond for life. So life pair bonding. And then the alpha pair will have pups. And all the other dogs in the pack help to raise those pups. So the brothers, the sisters, last year's pups, they all work really hard to protect the pups. These pups here are just about 3.5, 4 weeks old. And they're already weaned, and I'm going to show you a little fun shot I got from camera traps last year. Because I'm now, research techniques, I'm now getting a lot of information that I never could get before with camera traps. And so we've got camera traps out, and they're not, so here we are. This is a great shot from a den. You can see they don't care a damn about the camera. And the alpha female suckling, and what happens is all the other members of the pack try to help her to be weaned of the pups. And so what they do is they keep offering the pups little, as she suckles, they come and say, and I call this slide meat or milk. So they come, and I'm sure the guys are having bets, actually, They're saying, well, I bet that puppy's going for my meat first. But once the puppies then start to get weaned, by 3.5 weeks, or she is completely weaned. They can have huge litters. The females can have up to about 9. It's rare, but in big packs, the females have very large litters, and in small packs, they have small litters. Because in big packs, the female gets better fed. She's got more dogs helping her to get food. So she's in better body condition, she's banking more energy, she can implant more fetuses, and so in big packs, the alpha female will have large litters, and small packs, she has a few. And they can have up to, one female, I called her super bitch because she had 19 pups one year and 17 the next. They have incredible survival rates on the pups because they put so much investment into looking after them. And this is why it works well, that big packs have big litters and small packs have small litters. And in fact, the female that had the 19 pups, Neck, her name was Neck because she had a huge, beautiful white necklace around. After 11 months, 18 out of the 19 pups were still alive. And then by 12 months, there was only 12 pups because Carr had come and hit most of the pups on one big smash. And that actually really shows the problem. It's humans, human issues, cars, and there's a big war I've got on at the moment, which I'll share with you, and what we're doing with it is snares, poacher snares. Not set for the dogs, but set for bushmeat. But on a happier note, if I can get this working, here's some clips from a den. That's the den, that's where the pups are born. That will go down about 10 foot. The dogs will either dig it out themselves, and that's when the whole pack is like a team of excavators. They chuck the sand here, and then another dog will throw the sand from there further back. And I'll just share with you some of the pictures from the cameras. This is the sort of stuff we get. We're actually hoping, one of my little dreams is that in the same way that the Endangered Wolf Centre live streamed a birth last year, I'm hoping that we'll be able to live stream this maybe next year or the year after, if we can get one of the satellite companies to donate airtime from a satellite, that we could actually, this could be something that could be in people's computers, actually seeing really what's going on. That meat didn't last very long, it's already gone. You see it dropped out there. So, just to share with you a few kind of fun things from the field. Just share what we do. So the camera traps go up. But we have little, there's always little fun stories, because sharing this is the first year I've used camera traps, and then we're encountering something I hadn't expected. You see those eyes? There's a lot of cheek in there. What's that camera? Oh, that's, and there's absolute, that eye is saying everything. It's like, I'm bored. I want something to play with. They actually this year they took one of my blinds down and took the sleeping bag and ran off with it and tore it into 1,000 pieces. But anyway, and it gets even more fascinating. My goodness. And it's just, I'm working it out. And then, it's on its side, because you can see the next photograph with the trees on its side. And, it's upside down. Now we've got pictures of the sky. Job done. And it's great working with these dogs. They're so inquisitive. They're always up to something. And so next year I'm going to have to get cable ties, and my suitcase coming back from here. In Africa we can't buy anything. I spend my life in Home Depot when I'm here, buying out all their zip ties and duct tape and you name it. So this time I'm coming back with mountains of duct tape, gorilla duct tape, to see if they can get through that stuff. So now I'm going to share with you, just give a rough where I am. Well, I'm based, this is Zimbabwe, and just to kind of point it out, we've got dog populations up there by Wangi National Park going right up to Victoria Falls. We've got some contiguous populations into Botswana, but I'm going to talk about that. And then right at the top there, we've got our biggest population by the Zambezi Valley, probably a good 350 dogs in that place where it says Mana Pools National Park. And I'm going to talk quite a lot about that, because you've got Mozambique to the one side and you've got Zambia to the north. Because one of the challenges we have for conservation is, you work hard in your own country trying to get laws and get everything sorted out. But then animals don't have passports. They walk across borders. And we have to get transboundary agreements. And to get those agreements, we have to have data. We have to show these other countries what's going on. Now, this is particularly pertinent because last year St. Louis Zoo donated 2 satellite collars. Now, they're not cheap, they're very expensive collars, but they give us the sort of information that we need. And to share with you who do I work with and how I work, well, I share with you some of my field team. I've got a young African team that I'm building up, straight out of grad school, but also, and obviously some of them wouldn't be quite vet techs yet, but I'm trying to get them up to tech status, and students I'm hoping ultimately I'll get them onto master's and Ph.D. programs. Just to share with you some of the way we operate. The lady on the right there, Lisa Marie, she's from Houston Zoo. She came out to join us because we welcome people who've got skills to come and help train our staff. She's a very highly qualified vet tech, and she trained all our staff in microscope procedures and helped them with sampling, some of the sampling techniques that she could show them, and I could reinforce with other sampling techniques. And we've got a collaboration which tied in very nicely because we've got a wonderful collaboration here at St. Louis Zoo with the nutrition department. because they have no idea what the wild parameters, what should the blood parameters look like for a wild painted dog. So we're helping there to help them with their diet. But from our side, we're doing stress hormones. And we collect the samples, and they're being analyzed here, and we've got this wonderful collaboration. So here's my team. This is a biologist's dream, is poop. It's all we ever do, is collect as much poop as we possibly can. It's like gold. We all get very excited. And just share with you what sort of information we get. Some of you may know already, from poo we get DNA. The outer surface, there's DNA there. In the middle, there's stress hormones. So we do stress hormones. There's parasites. And there's hair. There's the hair of what prey animals. So we get all that information just from a wonderful poo sample. So that's why we collect a lot of it. And it's great. Our team, we work on that. And then, of course, we're training. This is where, vet tech comes in and helps train some of my staff. Saves me having to, be kind of retraining and training all the time. Microscope work, and they're very proud of themselves. So that just gives you a little insight into what's going on. So people often say, well, what's your year look like? Well, the field season starts when the rains stop. Because when the rainy season, like now, you can't even get a vehicle into the field. There's just water everywhere. It's pointless going out because you're not going to get much information. But we get March, April, May, June, July, August, September. All those months we're out in the field solidly collecting information. And then the other months we'll obviously work on analyzing some of the stuff. To find the dogs, we often have to fly. And these are my students, the first time they'd ever flown, and I get back down. And I love having these young students with me because, when I've got a problem with my phone or something, I just go, can you show me how to use this, please? And they go, yeah. Hand it back to me. And in this particular case, we landed, and they'd obviously never been in a plane before. And I said, oh, you must, Tendai there has got a smashing relationship with her mum, who's really excited that her daughter's doing wildlife conservation. And I said, have you told your mum? She said, yes, of course I've already. I said, you must tell your mum. She said, I've already told her. Which is sort of typical. I'm just going to share with you, before I move into some of the field, I'm going to share with you, obviously, natural enemies, painted dogs, do obviously have to encounter other predators, lions and hyenas. But they're so organized, painted dogs are so organized, and they're such a team that they manage to deal with lions and hyenas very effectively. And the next clip I'm going to show with you, I'm going to explain it first so that you can see some of the aspects of it. Well, the scene is this. We've got a pack of painted dogs. They're under a tree, minding their own business, under a bush, a thicket of small trees, minding their own business. They've got their pups are right in the middle, because that's where the pups are, to keep them safe. And some hyenas are coming, trying to see if they can steal a puppy. And what you actually get to see, and this is, talking about, I was talking earlier on about this communication, infrasound, ultrasound. I don't know how they're doing, because when we watched them, they were at that tree, and there was, apart from a head lift, there was not a sound said from the dogs, nothing we could hear, not even anything we could see. It wasn't dogs kind of flagging, signaling with their tails. And then suddenly it's almost like in a professional football game where someone goes, 98, some secret signal for you go left, you go right, you do that. And this is exactly what the dogs are like. They manage to communicate seamlessly, and they give the dog equivalent of 98 when someone presses a starting pistol. Just see if this is going to go. Right. So here we are. There's the dogs minding their own business. Okay, one's seen something, and then they all put their heads down. There's hyenas, obviously. They're not quite sure. And there's about 5 or 6 of them. It's called organization. It's a dog equivalent to scoring a goal or two. I mentioned earlier on about this division of labor because it's so lovely to see. And I'm going to lead you now, share with you a dog that's, well, a few of them are dogs from that study area up in the Zambezi Valley there, up by Zambia and Mozambique. And the only thing separating it is this big Great Zambezi River that's about 3/4 of a mile wide. And so last year I found a dog in a pack with a broken leg. So unlike the vet in the early days, oh, well, we're going to do nothing, you know, got in there, I knocked him down, anesthetized him, gave him some antibiotics, did what we could. We even put a temporary splint on just to help, you know, for comfort levels for a while, one that was going to come off. And we released him with a small collar back with the pack. And I'm thinking, well, what are they going to do with Greg, the dog with the broken leg? Well, he was called Greg because I had a serious plane crash, as I mentioned, and I smashed all my legs. And when we found this dog for the first time, someone said, well, he's got broken legs, so he's got to be called Greg. Now, that's how he got his name. And so he got the maybe unenviable job. I'm going to share with you a clip of his job in the pack. Pup guard, pup babysitting. Oh. 20 pups. There he is, coming in. And he has to manage that lot. That's feeding time. Obviously, they're not interested in mother's milk meat anymore. Great. Some of you might have noticed that lovely little one puppy getting told off. They never ever have. Pups hardly ever have to be disciplined. When they're very young, they just literally. One dog the babysitter acts as the telling off. So he also tells all the pups off, him or her, and in this case it's a him. And normally they only seem to do something wrong once, like be greedy or something, and any sign of, when pups get taken to their first kill, there's like, oh, there's meat on the table, and you might see a little argument, and the adults come straight in and they just give that lunge, no biting or anything, and the puppies are on their back and okay, I won't do that again. Well, I said the species was endangered. I'm going to give you an idea. The orange, the big orange shaded area is the historic distribution of the painted dog. There were probably 500,000 to 1 million painted dogs in Africa 100 years ago. Like the wolf, they were slaughtered and persecuted in their thousands. In fact, in one 5-year period in Zimbabwe, more painted dogs were killed than occur in the whole continent of Africa today. They are highly endangered, and as I say, this is where Zimbabwe is. For those of you whose geography is as good as mine used to be. There's Zimbabwe, so these are the populations. It's a very important keystone population because it links Mozambique and Zambia and Botswana and South Africa and through to Namibia. And when I started working with painted dogs 25 years ago, if a dog left the sanctuary of the national park, it was shot and killed in 2 weeks. In those days, ranchers were the biggest problem, in the same way that the wolf was persecuted. I did a study in farmland to try and see, well, what is the reason behind all this? They'll kill cows. That's why we slaughtered them. So a pack of dogs moved into farmland, and I begged the farmers not to shoot. I said, because I need to study them. And they said, oh, but they'll kill the cows. I said, well, let's see what is, and if it gets out of hand, we'll have to make a plan. But I promised the ranchers that I would move the painted dogs if it became a problem, rather than have them shot. Wasn't in to say, oh, we'll just slaughter them. And the painted dogs were responsible for 1.7% of the farmer's losses. Not the value of his animals, of his losses. So they weren't they weren't the big cause of death. Actually, the biggest single cause of death in the ranching community of cattle was plastic bags, baler twine, cows swallowing most ridiculous items, and one silly cow swallowed a shoe and died while I was doing the study. So, and I said, well, now what's the reason? Oh, well, it was prejudice. And that's why, obviously, negative attitude was a serious cause for concern. I'm now going to just switch a bit, and I'm just going to share with you two stories of two collars, the two St. Louis collars. They were put on last year, and we're now I'm just going to share with you what happened to the dogs, the value of those collars, the value of the information of having them on, and how they've benefited conservation and will continue to do so. The first is a dog called Hornet. There he is there, having his collar fitted. Called Hornet because he had a black tip on his tail. And he wasn't an alpha male, just one of the male helpers in the pack. And satellite collar goes on. And suddenly, I got a fix. You get fixes every 5 days. And he's not in Zimbabwe anymore, he's in Zambia. And I'm like, and then I didn't get a fix for 10 days, and he was back in Zimbabwe again. And then I was like, well, what route's he doing? How's he doing this? And I was worried. And so then we managed to then get more fixes, and saw that Google Map thing there. That's the Zambezi River. That's nearly a mile there of water. And very cleverly, they're using the shallows to get across the main part of the river, and the other side is this enormous, very deep channel. So they've worked it out exactly. They know where the shallows are. They know where the deep channels are. So they run across the shallows, get to an island, the last island, and then do almost a gauntlet dash. Because obviously in there's crocodiles, there's hippos. It's pretty dangerous. But they want to find new territory. They're always looking for new land, somewhere to live. And to share with you what it looks like, was that there's the big escarpment there. It's a huge mountain range. You've got two big mountain ranges with the Zambezi River. And I was worried because that escarpment is full of snares. Poachers, no one goes up there, and the poachers, and the snares are a trap, a wire that's set as a noose that catches animals around the neck. For those of you that don't understand the kind of trap that's used in Africa, they're an absolute scourge in Africa. And suddenly, Hornet, after the collar's been on for 6 months, there's no signal from the collar. And now I'm absolutely going frantic because I'm like, well, I know he'd been to Zambia, and I know there's snares there. On the Zimbabwean side, there are no snares in the areas where in the protected area at all, and that's supposed to be a protected area. And for 4 months, we put a plane up to see if there was any signal from the collar. Interviewed every safari guide. It's long, busy work. Interviewed every safari guide. And said, well, I'm looking for this dog. And I almost, was out like, I've lost my dog. It was like that, And my staff were the same, and everywhere we went, my team would scurry, find everyone. Has anyone seen the dog? And finally, they were seen, and Hornet was seen alive. We'd been to every fix to see if there was a dead dog there. and his collar was completely smashed. He had been in the snare, but the collar, by accident, some of the wire had wrapped around the collar, and though it had destroyed, a $3,000 collar, it had saved his life. And it actually begs the question, how do you put a price on the head of an endangered species? They're not, we can't replace them. So I was happy for that, but also very importantly, we're now, because of, like that map that I showed you before, with them crossing the Zambezi River, we're now in dialogue with the Zambian wildlife authorities. Before they went into denial. They said, no, they don't swim the river. I said, they do. No, they don't. So don't bother with us. We're not interested in, And sure enough, we've now, because of that one collar, we're in dialogue with the Zambians. A lot of people on the Zambian side, the safari operators, are now interested in our case because they can see there's a possibility that if they can sort that snaring out, they'll have dogs in their area, which is great for them. Because before they used to, dogs we know they're only a mile away, but it's across the river and they're not going to make it. Well, they can make it. So, and then the other dog was one called Cochise, an Indian name. I thought it was quite apt. And Cochise was a young male. What we're doing now is we're satellite collaring all the young males who go these huge distances, because they're going to tell us where the problems lie, or where the corridors are. And so Cochise put the collar on. A few months later, he's off. He's dispersing with his brothers. 6 of them all go off to see the brave new world. And they go right across the north section of Zimbabwe, 300 or 400 miles. They traveled across. They came down. They came down here, and then they crossed into Mozambique without their passports. They got into Mozambique, and it was quite interesting. As they got into the Zimbabwe, I could see it from the satellite collar. So I contacted the Mozambicans and said, there's a Zimbabwean dogs have crossed. And the Mozambicans got really quite excited about this, which was important. The wildlife people, who before I'd never had any dialogue with. I'd tried to communicate a little bit, and you got yes, yes, and suddenly they were interested, because there's something was going on. And they were all like, yes, we'll tell everyone to look out. Well, unfortunately, it was not a very long song. 2 weeks in Mozambique, he was dead. And then it showed us, because something we haven't seen by looking at the map, there was a river here, this white line. And that river, one of my students is looking at landscapes, and that river, it's got people in it. The red is and we're looking at this fragmented landscape fragmentation. And so from these, collars, from these mapping, we're beginning to see where corridors can be. Here, for example, we can see up there is still a chance that if we made some deals with some of the villagers, we could probably get corridors, or say, look, engage in conservation, and this is where we start to understand where to target our conservation. But Cochise and all of his brothers all died and all fitted into plastic boxes. And that's the snare there to show you. It's a very sad story, and this is the sort of thing that they go through. It's horrible. If they survive, if we catch them in time to take the snare off, that's the kind of injury. But this actually firmed a resolve. Cochise dying firmed a resolve of mine, because many years ago I designed an anti-snare collar, a protective collar that gave the dogs about 60% chance of survival. So all it was a steel plate with rivets stuck here, and it would protect the neck, the windpipe in particular. And there's one on the top right-hand corner, top left there, where a dog's been in the snare, the collars are completely destroyed, but who cares? The dog survived. But we found it was only 60% effective. But because of Cochise, I decided that I'm on another mission again. I got the bit between my teeth. I now know that I've got to put protective collars on as many males as possible. But there was a flaw in that plan. Two flaws. One is it's only 60% effective, and I want it to be nearly 90 or 100% effective. Because if Cochise had have gone through with a proper collar on, he wouldn't be dead today. He'd probably be somewhere else in Mozambique, helping to genetically help the population. And an interesting little fun story with this collar, because when I first had this collar built, and I thought, no, this is ridiculous. You know, we're having to put this on to protect an animal, and it seemed a bit extreme. Well, anyway, I put it on the first dog, and we're talking, 20 years ago. Put this collar on, and immediately started to monitor the collar for activity, because we've got these activity sensors. And suddenly the dog disappeared into thick forest, so I couldn't see what they were doing. But I was getting activity sensors all the wrong times of the day. So and again, it's important, son, you must follow up what you're doing. So after 3 days, I couldn't stand it anymore, because when they should have been resting 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock until 4 o'clock, I was getting all this activity. And in my mind's eye, there was a dog lying there trying to, writhing around, trying to either hang himself in a tree to get it off or doing whatever he could. So finally, I nearly broke my Land Rover, my vehicle, to get into the bush to have a look. And there's this dog just lying there, fast asleep. And I thought, oh, I'm waiting now. I'm convinced he's stressed. He didn't look stressed, but in my own mind's eye, this dog was seriously going through hell because I'd had all these activity. And I waited about an hour, and then suddenly one of the pups came up, and the antenna, I'd rerouted the antenna to run along the back, and he went, tug, tug on the antenna, set off the activity sensor, and then the dog just went, oh, yeah, okay. And then an hour later, tug, tug on the antenna, oh, it doesn't play, oh, okay. And after 4 days. So I felt very relieved about that. But I then, with Hornet and Cochise, with Cochise dying and with Hornet nearly dying, I've redesigned this collar, and it's something that's often something you do for one species. It's not just painted dogs. Often a lot of these species become ambassadors for a lot of other species under the umbrella of painted dogs. Well, in this case, I've been designing a special clip that's going to fit onto the side of the collar. And the clip is actually, when the wire goes in, it's going to hold it, and it won't be able to go anywhere. And it will increase 60% to 80%, 90%. And then this is the nice thing about, I come on these trips, and I talk to a lot of people, and then someone else says, have you thought about trying that? Because we all think differently, and this is what's so important. And then someone said, well, you could put a V in the clip, which will act as a wire cutter. And so now, with Houston Zoo, and this is great, we've got the whole workshop department of Houston Zoo as a project, as a zoo project, apart from fixing enclosures and maintenance, as a project is to help build the new collars. And whereas the current collar, this collar here, I'm furious, it's always the same. I design it, the company makes it, gives me cheap collars for a short while, and now 20 years later, they want $500 a collar. And I want to collar a lot of dogs, and it's kind of, we want, conservation dollars are important. Well, we're now looking at a point that once we finish these collars, we think they're going to come in like a non-profit company for making the collars. They'll come in at probably $100 to $150 a collar. And the clips, we can give those out to lion conservation or lion collaring people collaring lions, cheetahs, leopards. The clips can be just riveted on, and all we have to pay for initially is the profile, which is about $3,000 to make the die. After that, you know, it's $20 for a 10-foot length, which does a hell of a lot of collars. So, you know, this is one of the spin-offs of some of this work. And then, you know, what's so important, and because we are a global community, and it is all about partnerships and sharing, as I mentioned earlier. And the same collar this time, before we field it, like 50 or 40 of them, or 30 or more, we're going to go find some of the domestic dog working groups here in the States. And they're going to test the collars for them and say which design works better than the other design. So we'll have domestic dogs running into snares, obviously, with their handle and getting chocolate drops, or whatever they get, or a ball to play with once they've just walked in. And on early trials, this is looking quite promising. You see, I'm still talking, and I was the first guinea pig, and we made a dummy collar up, and we threw this wire over my neck, I think about 20 times, pulled hard on it, and never once was I compromised to the point that I felt that I wouldn't have been able to break the snare. So these sort of collaborative projects are really important, and this is what we're hoping to be able to do. And it shares with you the kind of the story about how, you know, how satellite collaring helps us to understand really what's going on, to see the problems, see the magnitude and which problems are more important. And ideally, with this collaring program, we'll have collars at a price we can afford, and dogs like Cochise next time will not die. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, we can take questions on, you know, anything and everything. Yes? No, she hasn't. It looks like she's teasing everybody. She's just getting lots of food, though. Probably a good trick on her behalf. Well, I'll pretend I'm pregnant and they give me more food, you know. But in her case, her pack is her keepers. Oh, you might be pregnant. Have some more food. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so they get up, ladies saying, they get up, you know, early morning, first light, or before it's light, and then they hunt until about 9 when it gets hot. And then they all just lie in a big dog heap for the rest of the day, find a shady spot, and they don't move. But it's really fascinating seeing these, and we call it a dog heap, because they lie, literally, all piled on top of each other. And it seems that the happiest dog is the one at the bottom, because it's contact. You know, it's literally every dog is trying to touch the others. And it's quite beautiful to see. And we also, and then they slowly lose heat during the day, because we think that, you know, one of the changes that they have, differences between painted dogs and domestic dogs and wolves, painted dogs don't pant at all. So they build up heat when they're hunting, a bit like camels do. We're just pretty sure this is what's going on. They build up heat. The ears make sure that the brain, the most important part of the body, stays cool. Yeah, and particularly because when they're running, they have the ears full forward. You know, you normally expect them to fold the ears. And then they just let that heat dissipate. And then they're ready to hunt again later on in the day when the body temperature is cool enough to start hunting again. Yes. Yep.
What size did you say they get to, and has anybody attempted any type of domestication?
Yeah, what size do they get to? Well, they're probably about the size of a, you know, long-legged German Shepherd, a good-sized one. Weight, probably 60 pounds, 50, 60 pounds, 60 pounds. But incredibly powerful for that. As for domestication, people have tried to have them as pets, you know, but then people try to have chimpanzees as pets and lions as pets, and it's always ends up in tears. You know, they are a wild animal. Domestication is a process that takes thousands and thousands of years. And so that's not a possibility. Yes, there's a question at the front, and then I'll take the one at the back.
So, is there a method you've developed or anyone has developed regarding identification of these animals? Patterns to tell one from the other?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, that's why we call them painted dogs. They're so outrageously marked. I've been trying to get computer programs to do it for us as well. But your human eye it's really easy to see. We keep a photographic identity file of every dog we know. The left side's different to the right side, the tails are different, everything's different. It's the easiest animal in the world to identify because the scientific name translates as a painted wolf-like animal. I don't know if I've, I can try very briefly, but to see if I've got, let me just see, and then maybe this may or may not come up, because let me just pop this out a minute and we might be lucky. But I can just share with you some of the photo ID files. In the meantime, I can take a question at the back. That's right. Yeah, what happens to the pack if either the alpha dies? Well, normally what happens is that the pack dissolves along single-sex lines. Because basically, you know, the alpha female has chosen the alpha male because she likes him. Yeah, absolutely. And so normally what happens is the pack just dissolves into single-sex lines, and all the males go one way and all the females go another, and they try and find mates. Right, so one quick look, and I can probably just pull it straight up from there. And next question while I'm, yes? Yeah, there's asking about the reproductive suppression, and if there's one female that reproduces, do the other cycle? None of the other females cycle at all. Only the alpha female cycle. We have no idea how it happens. It's quite amazing, because it's not like there's no dominance. It's not like she's exerting some fear response, you know, and all the they just don't cycle. And so she's the only one that cycles, and then she's the only one that normally gets mated. Well, she's the only one that gets mated by the alpha male.
But if something happens to the alpha female, and the other females climb on arrow, that pack of females can be able to...
Yeah, then yes. Once they separate, so like when a bunch of sisters leave and say, Mum, we're going, as soon as they're out of the influence of the alpha female, then the chosen female cycles. Yes, you may. When we're collaring, well, first of all, when I'm collaring a dog, normally the pack just waits, often very, very close. And that's also important for us then, when we're collaring and, you know, brought them under anesthesia. All my team, everyone has to be quiet, respectful, you know, no loud noises, low profiles, almost as much as anything to give off the signal to the other dogs that we're not there, you know, hurting the dog that they're with. And we also have minimum handling. So there's a lot of things procedures I do not do when they're under anesthesia, so I don't kind of have them weighing them, you know, putting them in sacks and weighing them and all this, that, and the other. I like to get them back to their pack. Okay, yes, they've got a bangle around their neck. But that's where it begins and ends. And it's very successful. I mean, I have literally had a pack of dogs. Sometimes they're so faithful to the dog that's gone down that they'll literally they just lie almost on top of him. And for example, the very last dog I darted, Harpy, Greg, the dog I was telling you about, he decided to help raise this year's pups, and I never thought he'd disperse because he's got a bad leg. But he's so bonded with his brother Harpy, when his brother Harpy and 2 other males said, let's go, he said, well, I'm coming. And he's gone off and he waited to raise this year's pups, and then he dispersed. And when I darted Harpy, the alpha male, Greg went and lay right beside him, and I literally had to kind of sidle right up and slowly coax him away so I could get to him and deal with him. Yes, any other questions? Yes? Well, I think it's a small group. I think it's about 3. Yeah. Obviously, Steve can answer that.
We actually have been working with an ACA SSP coordinator for the African dogs, and what we've requested is a group of not more than 3 or 4 animals, same gender. It's a new facility, so we don't want to start with a breeding group. And oftentimes, since we're acquiring this group, the species, we have not had this animal here at the zoo for many years. Sometimes you have to start with a surplus group or a single group like this, and then eventually, once you've been working with that species for a while, then you may get a breeding recommendation and bring it on and go to that point. But that's what we'd like to start with, a small group that's and we don't have to bring those animals in though until after the beginning of the year. It's one of the nice things about our new exhibit and the bear exhibits as well, that we have a buffer period of several months. We're really not going to open up until next spring, so we have time for vegetation to get its evaluation and also for acquisition of animals. We have the bears here already, but we have that buffer period, so we're not pressured to release animals.
I don't know if something's going to happen here, but there we go.
Yes. Steve, how many zoos do you have in oh gosh, I think it's about 40. There are about 40 zoos in that. More than you would think. With about 225 zoos that are part of our association. So there's a good number of zoos, but not everybody's breeding.
No.
There may only be not more than half a dozen zoos that really have had success of working on trying to breed their dogs.
So here's the, how we, from the field, we have our ID files, and you can see everyone is different, One's got a white V there, just every single one you can see very easy. I don't need to point out all the differences. And they're all different, and it makes it brilliant. I mean, they've got their own tattoo. All right, any other questions? Yes. The average lifespan. Well, we have the 2 lifespans. There's a lifespan that you would live if humans didn't get you, and there's a lifespan you'd live, in the real world. Most dogs, in some of the very high areas of high human pressure, may not live more than 3 or 4. However, there was one dog, the oldest dog ever, was like, some of the wolves you hear about, the stories about the last wolf in the States when they were trying to persecute get rid of the last wolf. And there was a dog, I called him Bigfoot. And amazingly, he was one of those dogs that was in the farmland. And he was a master. And no one was going to kill that dog, or his family. And he lived in farmland his whole life, much against my better efforts to try. I caught him and the whole family twice and moved him, because I'd promised the ranchers I will move him and his wife and his kids and the whole shoot, and captured the whole lot and moved them 400 miles, and on day 1 he escaped and he was back where he started again. But this time he only brought his wife and one of his kids, and then started a whole new family, and some of his daughters stayed. He lived to at least 12 years old. But he could have been older, because I last saw him when he was at least 12. And when I first saw him, I assumed he was 2, but he might have been 3, so he could have been 13. He was the oldest dog. But I always find it kind of great that it's a lovely sign of hope that some of these dogs, the real smart cookies, can survive in these human-dominated landscapes, like much the same as some animals work out how to live in urban landscapes. It's great, and we need those animals. Any other? Yes. Well, obviously it will have a contribution, but the main reason is that when they're running at full speed, they keep the ears forward. And I first got to find out about it, and then I had a student, we looked at it with wind tunnels and models. I was actually supporting a friend of mine who was running the London Marathon, and he was running in a dog suit, and I said, well, I'll come and support you. And so I was wandering around the streets of London with a dog suit and these big ears. And I got to London Bridge, and every time the wind blew slightly, I suddenly got a cold head, and I'm like, what's going on? And then I realized what was happening was that the ears, even my Mickey Mouse ears that I'd stuck on, were acting as catching the air, and then they were funneling it through my head. So you've got twice the amount of volume of air. So it's acting like a nature's fan. Right. I think that may wrap it up. Any last question?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Dr. Rasmussen. Thank you all for coming.
Right, let me take all my stuff.